It was a long day at work. I had a lot of presentations to present, a lot of meeting to attend, but one thing had kept me going throughout the day. Every evening I try to spend time with myself thinking about whatever that comes across my mind first. I normally do this as I return home, but today I had to meet my aunt who had shifted into a new house, and my aunt was very excited about it. She told me that the house was gorgeous, but did not reveal any details as it would spoil my experience. As I entered my car after work, I switched on the car's AC and thought of taking a power nap to freshen up before going to my aunt's place. I reclined my seat and leaned back and closed my eyes, and as I did this I felt as if the seat was sucking me into my dream. In my dream I was standing in front of a cabin or a cottage kind of a thing. The door was small with a lot of small details. It seemed to be a pretty heavy door. I looked up and saw a party sign saying, "Welcome back," hanging with the help of nails hammered to the edges of the door. I opened the door and was shocked. "A dead cat!" I exclaimed. I looked up and saw a girl dressed in white weeping. I went closer. It was an awkward situation. I did not know the girl, and the girl was weeping over her dead cat. "I am glad you could make it here, James," she said. How does she know my name? I thought. I stood there and stared at her. She looked familiar. I asked her for some water. She handed me a glass of water and asked me to excuse her for some time. She went into one of the rooms. That's when I realized I forgot to ask her name. I knew that it would be disrespectful of me to ask her name because she knows who I am, but I don't know who she is. But since it was happening in my mind, I made a move. I started checking all rooms and they all were pretty sketchy. I found the girl in the last room. She was holding a doll, a very big doll. Unlike other dolls, this doll had no expressions, and the girl was acting like the doll, completely phlegmatic. She started walking towards me and I freaked out. I ran to the hall. She was carrying the doll and following me. She entered another room. I took the chance and made a dash towards the main door to find out that it was locked. I turned around and the girl jumped on me, and I woke up. My power nap seemed to have extended time, and instead of feeling fresh, I felt weak and feeble. I was too tired to go to my aunt's place. I called up my aunt to tell her that I wouldn't be able to go to her place. She was disappointed, but she asked me to come over the next morning. I said I was fine with it since it was a weekend, so I went home, had dinner, and went to sleep. The house returned in my dreams. I was sitting in the hall. It was nighttime and pitch dark, except the hallway, which was kind of bright because of the moonlight. I switched on a few lights, but none of them turned on except one that kept flickering. I went and sat silently on the sofa. That's when I heard a loud thud. It sounded as if something had fallen. I went to see what it was. It was the upper body of the doll. The lower body was missing. I examined the doll, and right then I felt something towards my left. I looked towards my left and saw the girl. She was staring at me. She had blood-stained hands and straight hair touching her elbow. Ran to the floor above, leaving the doll behind. I entered a room and hid behind its door. I looked out at the corridor through the gap between the door and the hinges. I saw the girl's shadow. A few seconds later I saw the girl. She walked right past my room. I sighed a sigh of relief. I looked out at the corridor again. This time she was standing in front of my door. I was petrified. I backed out. I looked around wondering what to do. That's when I caught something under the bed. It was a hand. I bent down. It was her! I made a dash out of the bedroom and entered another room. She was following me with a doll in her hand. I broke the glass of the window and jumped out of the window and hurt my knee. I limped out of the gate and ran as fast as I could with the sprained knee. I turned around and saw her standing outside the gate with the doll in her hand. I woke up. It was 7 a.m. I was thinking about the dream. It felt as if it was very real. I had to limp as I had actually hurt my knee in my sleep. I had fallen off my couch. I called my aunt to confirm with her that I was coming. She said, "I just realized that this is my childhood house. It seems pretty new now. Everything is fixed. The lights, the doors, the big broken window, everything." "Just wait a second. What is that? Oh my gosh. Look at this thing. I remember this so well." And then she disconnected the call. Now I was eager to know what it was. So I got ready quickly and drove to her house. I entered the driveway. It looked very familiar. I saw my Aunt Reddy waiting outside. My aunt was a peculiar old woman. Nobody met her except me. I was family for her because I was always fond of her since the beginning. Even though she did some very odd things, I saw that my aunt had something in her hand. I got out of the car, congratulated her, and gave her a tight hug. I saw what she had in her hand. It was a doll. Not just any doll, it was the doll from my dream. I felt shivers down my spine. I walked ahead and my aunt followed me, talking about the doll. The last time I saw her, she was broken from her hip, but now she is completely fine. Oh, how much I love this doll. I was feeling very scared now. Finally, when we reached the door, she said, "Oh, we are back at home, sweet home." I turned around to give her a smile, but she was nowhere to be seen. I looked at the door and looked up. In large, bold letters, there was written, "Welcome back." For context, I was 15 when this happened. Most of my friends were the same age. When we did get there, it was rather cliché. There was fog, it was rather dark, and there was a light drizzle of rain. We went to the main gate, which was padlocked shut. We decided to help each other hop over it and made a ton of noise. We were laughing and giggling the whole time, unsuspecting of what was to come. We looked around a small play place/park with flashlights we had on our person. Even with our somewhat powerful flashlights, our visibility was rather limited. We decided to enter the decaying building. Glass and dirt crunched under our feet as we stepped into the daycare section of the complex. They were still old Legos, wood chips from previous furniture, old torn dolls and toys thrown about. The further we walked around the daycare section, we naturally became more and more silent until all we could hear was the crunch of the dirt under our feet. I found some crayons in a plastic container in the corner of the room. I walked over to pick them up, but when all of a sudden we heard a loud crash coming from behind a metal door leading to the psych ward part of the building. My friends and I all looked at each other. As a whole, we were a group of 5. Most of them were very bold and cocky. We all looked at each other when my friend Brian suggested we go back and look to see where the sound came from. Personally, I was not so fond of the idea, but with my group of friends, there was no way anyone was going to decline such a thing. We all stacked up on the door and opened it. It was rusted to the floor, and we heated it to get it open. As we walked in, the metallic smells and must became stronger, with a hint of something else which I couldn't put my finger on at the moment. We walked in, our flashlights pointed in every direction, with Brian leading the group. The hallways were tight and to the left and right, with the occasional metal doorway, some with doors open. I felt slightly claustrophobic, and I felt a little hard to breathe. As we continued, Brian shunned his flashlight into a room and recoiled. We all stopped walking as Brian slowly entered the room. "What is it?" I asked him. "I thought I saw someone in here." To be honest, I thought he was just messing with us to increase our anxiety. Looking back, I think he was completely honest. He headed back out the room when we continued walking deeper into the psych ward, when another friend swiftly told us to stop. We came to a halt and all listened. In the distance ahead of us, we heard the subtle hitter-patter of footsteps echo through the hallway. We all looked at each other, feared in each of our eyes. Brian continued walking towards the sound. We considered turning back for a second without Brian, wondering if some ghost or something was in the building, but we couldn't do that then. The closer we got, the more I felt like I was being watched, when finally we entered the room on the right, which had the smell of rotting meat. In front of us was a dead deer. Its innards were spilled all over the floor, staining the concrete. In front of my head, a very weak stomach, and vomited all over the floor. That's when we heard whispering from somewhere. Brian shone his flashlight to the corner of the room where a man with short hair was standing with his head down. He wore a bright green t-shirt stained with what I assumed was blood and torn beige pants. He did not have any socks and his feet seemed damaged. He was twitching sporadically and continued to mumble even after he saw him. We stared at him for a solid 30 seconds before he made his first true movement. He looked up at us with a haunting grin that sent shivers down our spines. "You guys here for the feast?" He said each word with very inflection and energy. This kicked us over the edge, and we bolted out of that room all the way back to the day hair center. The door was still open, and we decided to try and slam it shut, but the rust and pure weight of the door almost kept it open. It took 3 of us pulling with all of our strength to close it. But just before we did, I could still see the silhouette of the man watching us, his white teeth being the only other human feature I could see. As we sat behind the middle door, catching our breath for a second, we all looked at each other for confirmation that we all saw the same thing. After a little bit of labored breathing from each of us, we heard a light tapping on the door. That's when we decided it was time to leave. We booked it out of the vicinity completely and ran home. A year after we visited that spot, police went back to do a routine search of the area and found the man. It was stated that this guy used to go to the psych ward before it closed down. He escaped the facility he was transferred to and lived off of the wildlife around the complex. When the cops brought him in, he had a series of diseases and sickness from eating raw meat. Mental conditions was much worse than before. There were future rumors that he did kill someone in the forest while searching for food, but nothing has been confirmed. In the end, guys, be careful, especially in dangerous areas such as abandoned buildings.